Papers fell from the sky in 1944. Germans had to choose fast. Read them or burn them. Nobody admitted they read the leaflets, not even after the war. But every civilian had touched one. Why were they so dangerous? The leaflets knew exactly where people lived and worked. Streets, names, factories. How did the Allies know everything? Families whispered about them in the dark. Sharing meant prison. Not reading meant missing survival information. What did they actually decide? One leaflet changed everything. A single message made an entire village disobey Hitler's final orders. What was written on it? The discovery. It's 1944. The war is still going. Then something strange happens. Papers start falling from the sky over German towns. Thousands and thousands of them, like snow but not snow. Everyone stops and looks up. Children run to catch them. Adults freeze. Soldiers shout orders to burn them. But it's too late. The papers are already everywhere. On streets, on rooftops, in people's hands. Nobody knows what they say yet. But everyone feels something dangerous, something that could change everything. The Nazi government doesn't want people reading these papers. That's the first sign they matter. That's the first sign something big is happening. But what did those papers actually say? Nobody admitted they read them. Here's something strange. After the war ended, historians asked German people about these leaflets. Almost nobody wanted to talk. They stayed quiet. Some said they never saw them, others said they burned them immediately. But when historians dug deeper, when they asked the right questions, something incredible happened. People started telling the truth. They had read the papers. Not just read them. They kept them. They shared them. They memorized them. They hid them from the police. Families whispered about them at night. Children learned secrets from these papers. But for decades, nobody spoke about it. Why would they hide this? Why was reading a piece of paper so dangerous? The answer will shock you. The Nazi government was absolutely terrified of these leaflets. What made them dangerous? The leaflets weren't just simple papers. They had something special, something the Nazis couldn't control. They had information, real information that contradicted everything the government told people. The German radio said the Nazis were winning. The leaflets said something different. The government said the Allies couldn't reach German cities, but the leaflets proved they could. The leaflets contained warnings, specific warnings, not vague ones. They warned about bombing locations. They warned about military strategies. They warned about what was coming next. Families realized these papers were valuable. These papers could save lives. So people kept them. People shared them. People risked everything to read them. The punishment for keeping Allied leaflets was severe. Prison, labor camps, sometimes worse. Yet Germans kept them anyway. But here's the most shocking part.
The warning. The leaflets knew everything. This is where it gets really strange. The leaflets mentioned specific places, specific streets, specific neighborhoods. They even mentioned factories by name. How did the Allies know all this? How did they know where German families lived? How did they know where weapons were being made? The answer terrified German civilians. The Allies had maps, detailed maps. They had information from spies, information from people inside Germany. The leaflets proved that nobody was safe. The Allies could reach anywhere. They could bomb anywhere. They knew everything about German cities. This information was golden. This information could help you survive. If a leaflet warned that your neighborhood would be bombed next week, you could leave. You could move your family somewhere safe. This is why people risked their lives to keep these papers. One woman's story proves exactly how important these warnings were. A mother's choice. A mother in Berlin received a leaflet. Her hands shook as she read it. The paper warned about bombing in her exact neighborhood. It gave dates. It gave times. She had maybe hours to decide. Stay and pray the warnings were wrong, or leave everything behind and run. She chose to leave. She took her 2 children, nothing else, just her children. She walked away from her home, away from her possessions, away from her life. 3 days later, bombs fell on her neighborhood. Her house was destroyed. Everything was gone. But her children were alive. The leaflet had saved their lives. She never told anyone about this, not for 50 years. But when historians finally asked her, she cried. She cried because she realized something. That piece of paper was the most valuable thing she ever owned. But not every family trusted the leaflets. The doubters. Not everyone believed the warnings. Some families thought it was a trick, a psychological operation, a way to cause panic. Some people said the leaflets were lies. Nazi propaganda, they thought. Why would the enemy tell the truth? So families made different choices. Some burned the leaflets immediately, some threw them away without reading them, some covered their ears and refused to listen. These families paid a terrible price. When bombs fell on their neighborhoods, they weren't prepared. They didn't evacuate. They didn't move their children. Some families lost everything. Some families lost people. Later, survivors felt deep regret. They wished they had believed the leaflets. They wished they had taken the warnings seriously. The difference between life and death sometimes came down to one simple thing: trusting a piece of paper, trusting information from the enemy, trusting that the Allies were telling the truth. And that trust wasn't misplaced. The accuracy revealed. Historians checked the facts. They compared the leaflet warnings with actual bombing records. What they found was astounding. The leaflets were accurate, extremely accurate. When a leaflet warned about a bombing location, bombs fell there. When a leaflet mentioned a factory, that factory was targeted. The Allies weren't guessing. They weren't making random predictions. They had real intelligence, real maps, real information. This accuracy spread through German towns like wildfire. People talked. Word spread. Even people who couldn't read learned about the leaflets from others. They learned that the papers told the truth. This created something powerful, hope, and something dangerous: doubt in the Nazi government. If the Allies knew everything, how could Hitler win? If the Allies could reach anywhere, how could Germany be safe? These questions spread, these doubts grew. The leaflets weren't just pieces of paper anymore. They were weapons of a different kind.
The choice, the impossible decision. Here's the situation German families faced. Possessing a leaflet was illegal. Reading it was a crime. Sharing it could mean imprisonment. But the leaflets contained information that could save your family. What would you do? You have a wife. You have children. You have maybe hours. Do you risk everything to keep this paper? Do you risk arrest? Do you risk your family being separated? Or do you destroy it and hope for the best? Some families chose to hide the leaflets. They put them in walls. They buried them in gardens. They wrapped them in cloth and hid them under floorboards. These families treated the leaflets like treasure because to them, they were treasure. They were survival guides. They were maps to safety. Other families faced the choice differently. Soldiers came to houses. Gestapo agents searched. They were looking for leaflets. Families had seconds to decide: burn it now or keep it and risk everything. Many people chose to keep them. They chose to hide them. They chose to believe the information was worth the risk. One family's story shows exactly how desperate the choice became. The baker's wife. There was a baker's wife named Anna. She found a leaflet in her garden. She picked it up and read it quickly. The leaflet warned about bombings coming to her town, specific streets, specific dates. She knew she had to act, but she was terrified. The Nazi police came to houses randomly. They searched for leaflets. They punished people who kept them. Anna made a decision. She folded the leaflet and hid it in her apron pocket. She kept it there for 3 months. Every day, she risked arrest. Every day, the paper was against her skin. But she kept it. She consulted it. She used the information to prepare her family. When bombing came to her neighborhood, she was ready. She had moved important things. She had prepared a safe place. She had warned her neighbors about the warnings from the leaflet. She saved lives with that paper. After the war, when historians asked her about it, she wept. She said it was the scariest and most important thing she ever did. She had broken the law. She had risked everything, but she had saved her family. But not all leaflets carried bombing warnings. The other message. The Allies printed different kinds of leaflets. Some warned about bombings. Some urged surrender. Some explained why the war was lost. But there was one type of leaflet that the Nazi government feared most. One message that terrified them above all others. This leaflet told the truth about the Nazi regime. It told stories of what was happening in camps. It told stories of persecution. It told stories that contradicted everything Germans were taught. These leaflets circulated in whispers. People were even more careful with these papers. These papers could get you killed. Not just arrested, killed. Because these papers revealed secrets. Secrets the government couldn't allow to be known. People who read these leaflets faced a moral choice. Do you stay silent? Or do you tell others? Do you pretend you don't know? Or do you act on what you've learned? Many Germans stayed silent, but some didn't. One group of young people did something extraordinary. The White Rose. A secret group called the White Rose used Allied leaflets. They read them. They believed them. They were young people, mostly students. They decided to do something dangerous. They decided to tell the truth. They copied the leaflet messages. They rewritten them. They printed them themselves. They distributed them in their universities and cities. The Nazi government was outraged. They launched investigations. They wanted to find these young people and punish them. The White Rose members knew the risks, but they believed spreading the truth was worth dying for. Most of them were caught. Most of them were executed. Their story became legendary. It showed the power of those fallen papers. It showed that information could inspire resistance. It showed that truth could matter more than safety. The leaflets had sparked something inside these young people, something that couldn't be stopped. Their story wasn't unique in one important way.
The spreading truth. The leaflets spread truth in ways the Allies never predicted. People didn't just read them silently. They talked about them. They debated them. They questioned their leaders. Church leaders mentioned the leaflet warnings in sermons. Teachers hinted at the leaflet messages in classrooms. Families discussed them at dinner tables. The papers multiplied in impact. One leaflet read by one person became 10 conversations, became 100 doubts, became 1,000 questions. Germans started to see their government differently. The government had been lying. The government was losing. The government was hiding something massive. This realization changed people. It made them less willing to follow orders blindly. It made them more likely to question authority. By 1945, when the war was ending, millions of Germans had been exposed to these leaflets. Millions had read them. Millions had been changed by them. The papers had done more damage to Nazi morale than any bomb. And this led to something unprecedented: the village that defied Hitler. Near the end of the war, Hitler gave a final order. All villages must defend to the last person. All citizens must fight to the death. No surrender, no retreat. One small village received this order. The people knew it meant death, complete death. Families would die, children would die, for nothing, because the war was already lost. Someone in that village had kept a leaflet, an old leaflet from years earlier. They passed it around that night. They read it together. They reminded themselves of what the Allies had promised. The Allies would preserve German towns if they didn't fight. The Allies would spare civilians if they surrendered. The village made a choice. They defied Hitler's final order. They refused to fight. They opened their gates instead. The Allies arrived and found a living town. A town of people who had believed a piece of paper. A town that had chosen life over death. A town that had chosen truth over loyalty to a dying regime. This story was almost forgotten, almost lost to history. But historians eventually discovered what really happened. The untold impact. Historians interviewed survivors decades later. They asked about the leaflets. They asked what impact these papers had. The answers were stunning. Many Germans said the leaflets changed how they thought about the war. Many said the leaflets gave them hope, hope that the Allies were winning, hope that the war would end, hope that their families could survive. Some said the leaflets convinced them the Nazi government was finished, that nothing could save them, that resistance was pointless. Some said the leaflets inspired them to resist, to question, to disobey, to protect others. The leaflets had multiple effects, different effects on different people, but almost everyone agreed on one thing. The leaflets mattered. They mattered to survival. They mattered to morale. They mattered to how people understood their own government. Historians estimate that millions of Germans had contact with these leaflets. Millions had read them. Millions had been influenced by them. Yet for decades, this story was ignored. The reason for this silence is both fascinating and troubling. The final cliffhanger. After the war ended, German survivors faced a choice. Do you talk about reading Allied leaflets? Do you admit you doubted your government? Do you explain that enemy propaganda influenced you? Many people chose silence. They were ashamed. They felt they had betrayed their country. They feared judgment from other Germans. They feared consequences from new German leaders. So they kept quiet. Millions of stories stayed hidden. Millions of experiences went untold. Historians had to piece together this history from fragments, from secret archives, from late interviews with elderly survivors, from declassified military records. What emerged was a hidden history, a history of ordinary Germans questioning their leaders, a history of people choosing truth over authority, a history of papers falling from the sky and changing minds. But here's what historians discovered most recently. Not all the leaflets have been found. Boxes of original leaflets still exist in military archives. Some have never been fully translated. Some contain messages that were thought to be lost. And one particular series of leaflets contains something absolutely revolutionary, something that would reshape how we understand the entire final year of World War II. What secrets do those undiscovered leaflets still hold?
German civilians faced an impossible choice when Allied leaflets fell from the sky. This psychological warfare proved devastatingly effective, crashing morale across entire communities. Soldiers questioning surrender options found themselves swayed by leaflet campaigns that promised safety. The Allied leaflet campaign fundamentally transformed how Germans viewed their government and future. What began as propaganda leaflets evolved into tools of hope and resistance. The civilian response revealed that truth, when told through simple paper, could challenge even the most powerful regimes. History changed because people believed.